This meeting is being recorded.
All right, that's us. It's the 15th of May, 2025. This is the Gimbalabs weekly dev stand-up. We get together on Tuesdays at 16 UTC just to talk about some things we're building. What we do is right before going live, we give everybody who's here a chance to share some items that they might want to talk about today. And you can see we've been doing this just for the last few months as an experiment. We've had some work from the group working on the Asteria project. I've shared some things I'm playing around with. Nelson shared project idea. Martin gave us an update on Dandelion Light and some other ideas going down the list. Today, we're going to focus on two things, and we're going to give each of these topics about 20 minutes to work on together. First, we got Jorge, who has been creating some documentation about fractal democracy and how it might support the Cardano ecosystem. I'm going to hand the mic off to you in just a second. You could share with us your thoughts on what we talked about right before going live, is maybe we're at the moment to start thinking about implementing some of these ideas. So in a room full of developers, what might we start to build? I think that can be our guiding question for this conversation. And then after that, we'll hand it off to Harsha, who is one of the people leading the development of the Asteria implementation here at Gimbalabs. And you've got a couple of questions to guide us through. So I'm excited about this. I'm going to stop sharing screen. Jorge, it's all yours to share screen, but yeah, take us through what you're thinking. Fractal democracy, where to start?
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll share entire screen. Great. Okay, so I have the document here that I posted about 1 or 2 weeks ago. Are you guys seeing it?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so the goal here with the Fractal Democracy Protocol is to attack several basic problems we have in governance, one of them being incumbent advantage, the one I'm highlighting here. The other one being rational ignorance, and several other issues that we are facing in our current governance systems. Incumbent advantage is the advantage any person or entity that goes into power acquires to self-perpetuating power just by being in power already. We have had several examples of this, even within the Cardano community. For example, we had the Cardano Foundation during last Catalyst proposals, in which they used the Cardano they had already to vote the proposals that somehow they considered benefited them the most. And we also have rational ignorance, which is the price every entity or individual has to pay to acquire the necessary knowledge to do an effective voting. And the challenge this individual faces, because frequently that price he has to pay to acquire the knowledge is higher than the benefit he is going to receive from that knowledge. So Cardano usually tries to reduce rational ignorance by creating a delegation system. But the problem with the delegation system is that then you increase the first problem, which is incumbent advantage, because then the people that receives delegation, meaning the delegates, then they access these new positions of power. They begin to create networks of influence, and from those networks, then they can select their closest friends and begin some form of cartel formation. We also have in Cardano the problem of vote buying, which happens everywhere. I was contacted, for example, during my last Catalyst proposal by several unknown people asking me to vote for their proposals, and in return they will vote for my proposals. So we have that kind of collusion that also happens within current forms of governance. So that's what we are trying to attack here with the Fractal Democracy Protocol. And to do that, we propose to tokenize a measure of respect. And we understand respect. Well, the version of respect that we are considering here is the the way, the emotional feeling that we perceive by someone who does something for his community. So if someone, for example, feeds the poor, we usually respect that. If someone does something for the greater good, for the common good, we usually tend to respect that. So we want to quantify that measure of respect and to tokenize it. And very importantly, respect is very tied to private property. For example, we don't, as individuals, get into the house of someone else because we respect that house, and we respect that house because it's the consensus of the overall community that that house belongs to that person. So the notion of private property is very tied to the concept of respect. We respect the car of someone else or the property of someone else because is the community consensus that that property belongs to that person. So these three things are very tied together: respect, private property, and consensus. Consensus meaning the opinion of the community. If someone goes to a remote village in which the property is all common shared, then he might find a very hard time trying to defend any item as his individual property and use it only for himself. So yeah, the nature of consensus of an opinion is very tied, well, comes from the concept of respect, and those two things are very tied to private property. So we plan to tackle, to bring these three things together and quantify that. So the proposed protocol is as follows. We gather a community, whatever the size it is, hopefully no bigger than 1,000 or a few thousand people. And we have a budget for this community. So instead of operating as we are currently doing, which is whatever member of the community wants to receive some budgeting, he makes a proposal, and if he manages to convince us all, then he will receive the funding for that proposal. And then we as a community will have the challenge of checking if he is going to deliver or not, and the grade of quality that he is going to deliver his proposal with. Instead of that, we don't finance any proposal in advance. Instead, we as a community of 1,000 people attend weekly meetings. Whoever wants to receive any part of the budget has to attend the weekly meeting. And this is the minimum that any DAO, any organization will ask for any person. Just attend a 1 hour weekly meeting in which you will know what your community is doing. That's a minimum requirement. Within that meeting, the community of 1,000 people will be randomly assigned to breakout rooms of size 5 or 6. And within each of these groups, each member will report his contributions to the community, meaning each member will answer the questions: what did you do for this community, for example, for the Cardano community, within the last week or within the last time window, whatever we decide to choose. It can be within the last week or within the last month or within the last whatever. The point is, each member will answer the question: what did you do for the Cardano community within the last time window? So in each breakout room of 5 or 6 people, each member will report his contributions. And within that breakout room, the 6 people will have to arrive to consensus about a ranking, about who is the highest contributor, who is the second highest, and so on and so forth. So the last person, the person who gets the lowest ranking, who maybe didn't do anything for the community except for attending that 1 hour meeting, will still receive part of the budget. He will be paid for the time he spent going to that meeting and helping the community to arrive to consensus. And then, based on that, a set of points will be distributed. So we have an example here. For example, if we have a community of 6 people, the highest ranked member will receive 25 points. The second highest ranked member will receive 13 points, and all the way down to the person who presented the least contribution, who will receive 2 points. And if you notice, this distribution of points is not linear, is Pareto distributed, which is in accordance to the nature of these complex networks, in which the 20% of the people does 80% of the work. So we create a Pareto distribution so that those who contribute the most get the greatest number of points. By the way, this Pareto distribution is not any Pareto, is a Fibonacci distribution. So you can see that 2 plus 3 gives 5, and 3 plus 5 gives 8, and so on and so forth. 8 plus 13 gives you 21. And keep in mind that this group was formed from the randomization of the 1,000 people community. So if we have groups of size 5 within a 1,000 community, we'll end up each week with 200 groups of 5 people each. And let's suppose, for example, that this group during one given week was by randomization ending with very high contributing people, like the best of the people, so that this person who contributed the least within that group and was ranked last actually was unfairly ranked that week in comparison to the rest of the community, because he's a great contributor, but because of the randomness, he ended up within a group of very high contributors. Then next week, it is very likely that he will end up also in a group with high contributors. So next week, his ranking will be higher, and next week, higher. And because of the law of large numbers within probability theory, as the meetings progress, meeting after meeting, the actual rankings of people, the actual budget that people will come to receive, will converge to the right values. So the points will be distributed fairly according to the consensus of the community. Now, look, these points, as I said, are Pareto distributed, and then according to this points distribution, we distribute the budget of the community. So, for example, let's say that for each week, we have 10,000 Cardano tokens to be distributed, 10,000 ADA. So for each member, pro rata, according to the numbers of points he received, we will distribute those ADA. So this has several implications. One of them being that we don't have to, for example, in the Catalyst current functioning, we don't have to give some budget and then wait for 3 months, 6 months, or even a year for any individual or entity to deliver. Instead, we make an atomization. We take much more smaller time windows, and each week, each member will have to report what he's doing, what has he been doing during the last week, and he will receive not a big part of the budget, but a small part. So pivoting, changing directions, permanent knowledge of the community about what everyone is doing becomes much more efficient. Also, rational ignorance is dissipated because within each five breakout rooms, 5 members breakout rooms, everyone has to know what everyone is doing. And also, incumbent advantage is mostly minimized because then you don't have the set of your friends that will always vote for you and the people that you hired that will vote for you because you are randomized within the community. So you will have every member will have to justify to the community the budget he's receiving. So it's pretty neat. Then optionally, we can, if this works, we can create a second round in which only, let's say, the top 2 people or the top 3 people from each room goes to this second round, and we distribute following the same system, following a Fibonacci distribution, another points, more points, and then we redistribute the budget of the community, not according to only the people from the first round, but for the people for the 2 rounds. So we can do the math. If we have 200 groups of size 5, and only the first 2 people from each group goes to the second round, then we'll have 2/5 of people. That will be 200 people that goes to the second round, and that will be about 50 or 40 groups in the second round. And so that will mean that about 40 people will receive 233 respect points that will be mapped to the final budget allocation from the community. Then we can have from the people that got the highest respect from the community during the last, let's say, 12 weeks, and we can form a council. And this will be a council that has a rolling average that is formed from the rolling average of the highest respected people, the highest average respected people from the last 12 or 15 weeks, being these 12 or 15 parameter that the community can decide on. And so we have a system of governance that, a council of very knowledgeable people that has delivered consistently, that is delivering currently, and that has validated his work week by week with all the community. And those people can be the owners of the multi-sig that distribute the whole respect for that week. I propose that the council has a number of members given by this formula, where N is the number of people that attended the last meeting, the last X meeting, and that's pretty much the protocol. So that's the protocol I'm trying to implement here to do a test implementation here in one of the communities in South America. We have communities of farmers, milk, dairy products, producers, and all kinds of farming. So that's my main goal right now. My selfish reason to propose and to push this forward is to bring this to these farmer communities, where I do believe that it will be very helpful also for the Cardano community to start test groups implementing this proposal. And thank you, and I'm open to any questions. You are muted.
Didn't realize. Sorry. This is such exciting stuff, and I appreciate the design work you've put into this. And it's interesting because over on the Andamio team, we've also been thinking about farmers as one of the audiences for some of the things we're building. And so I want to share more technical details with you. But I just want to kick a question straight over to Adrian because he and I have been talking about this for the last few weeks. Can you imagine a local state modeled on what Jorge is sharing with us here?
James, every time you ask me, I will say, yeah, I can see that it's possible.
So are you challenging me to find the one where you say no? Is that the answer?
You can say so, yes.
It's very interesting. Jorge, what we've designed so far is a system where new governance models can be implemented flexibly while still sharing access to a broader system. So yeah, I'll be very interested to see where these conversations go. I see Nori and then Harsha.
Yeah, I love this idea, and I would love to see some experiments done, maybe using the Andamio protocol and creating a new local state around that. And you presented this at Odin on Monday, and next Monday there's going to be a larger community meeting to discuss these ideas and maybe try and do some experiments around it. So I'm wondering, um, yeah, I would love to see some of these things tested, like, and how much needs to be on chain, how much could start with a human level kind of practice just to see if it's working, and then take the stuff that works well and translate it into on-chain code, or I'm sure there's also going to be other tooling needed to collect votes and do all that kind of stuff eventually. But it might be a really great first project to try and build something on top of the Andamio protocol. If we're ready for that, I don't know. But I'll just drop something in chat too. If you're interested in the conversation next Monday, we're going to have hopefully a few more people there to talk about the idea with Jorge.
So I have a question about the edge cases you're talking about when like people like high contributors like end up in the same room and stuff. So the contribution is basically evaluated week by week, right? Say, for example, a contributor did a lot of work in 1 week, but in the next week they didn't. And in the week that they did a lot of work, they are just given 2 points. But in the next week where they didn't do the work, they are again given 2 points. Yes, I understand that in the long run it'll be normalized, but also I am concerned about the motivation. So these high contributors, will they still be motivated before they drop off in this scenario?
Yeah, I don't think that even though the meetings are weekly, I don't think the time frame that uh, the contributions are, well, that includes the contributions. Well, how do I say? The time frame to which that, I mean, I will say that you should present contributions from the last month at least, because in a week you can do really little things, like not so much. So even though the meetings are weekly, I will say that the question you ask is, what did you do for the community during the last month, the last 4 weeks, or a different time frame that the community decides to choose.
Very interesting. What are your developer needs to implement this? Are you learning to build it all on your own, or are you looking for people to collaborate with?
Well, what I want is to have the thing done. Actually, I started learning to develop Icon and Cardano, as you guys know, because it's pretty fascinating. But the pace is really slow, and I just learned, for example, about 2 weeks ago that you need to have a different infrastructure for the on-chain and from the off-chain things. And I'm not a web developer. So what I want is to have the thing actually done, And I'd like to create a pool. For example, each community will have its own coin, its own respect token, and I'd like to have a pool that back this respect financially. That will be my main goal, so that the whole incentives get aligned. Whatever needs to be done to get that is what I'm willing to do.
One question you wrote about non-transferable reputation. How will it work with tokens? Because you can always send tokens wherever you want.
So what's the question?
So you wrote in the paper about non-transferable tokens, but if you use tokens, you can always send tokens wherever you want.
Oh yeah, in the protocol we implemented in the last EOS, we had that 2 tokens were emitted within each week. One was the respect, which was non-transferable, and the other was the token that was transferable, was a liquid token that was the budget of the community. So we could have here, for example, either the respect being non-transferable and the ADA token, which is distributed and is transferable, or whatever it's design we decide to choose.
So just a personal note, I think it's better if you use a datum instead of tokens, because tokens, yeah, are not necessary in this case.
So
Instead
essentially,
of having different fungible tokens, which are the respect, you can just use one token, which is locked in a smart contract, and you just add the number of the earned respect in the datum.
Yeah, it would be nice if you could have like a score, like historical score of the greatest respect, the greatest contributors to the community,
yeah,
like a Hall of Fame.
I think there's a limitless amount of collaboration we could do here. And so starting to chart out what that looks like. It's just speaking to the Andamio team for a moment. I think a very high priority is to write our documentation about global and local states and then to figure out what a sufficient primer looks like for the minimum requirements of a local state. And then I think, Jorge, if you're interested, I would love to bring you into that work and get your feedback on the documentation that we have. Because essentially what we've built is a top level collection mechanism for consolidating people's different reputation and credentials they've earned, right? And so what you're suggesting is one beautiful way for people to build up their reputation through this respect rating. And I'm not calling it a token at this moment because I happen to agree with Adrian. We probably wouldn't want it to be measured in a token. We would put a number in some datum in a UTXO to represent this. And I can definitely imagine an implementation that goes that way. But imagine if that implementation was up and running and it was easy to integrate it with other sources of reputation. For example, I have learned in Plutus PBL or Aiken PBL. I have contributed to a paid project at Gimbalabs where I earned 1,000 data, and there's a record of that. And I have also earned respect in this system, this fractal democracy system that you're describing. Put all together, each of those is serving a different role in my overall reputation. But I don't want to be holding 16 different tokens in my wallet to capture all of my different reputations. What we've built is a placeholder where anybody can add a different way of bubbling up that reputation to what we call a global state so that they can take it with them. right? I can imagine respect working beautifully on its own, and I can imagine it working even better if people are able to then transfer the respect they've earned to other scenarios, even if there's a group that's not using it.
Wonderful. One additional point I haven't mentioned, or I have mentioned but tangentially, is that for communities of farmers, for example, little towns here, there are a bunch of multinational corporations that take a lot of the funding from those communities. So the reason I'm interested in doing this is that if whatever whatever expenditure anyone from this farming community has remains within the community, then the community gets a form of communal savings. And this can only be guaranteed if the community has its own token. So the way I envision this is each community having its own respect, communal respect, and its own token, community transferable token, and some liquidity pools joining different communities' respects in the long run. So the community that actually the reason this is called fractal democracy is because after you have a council within the community, then that council can go to represent that community within the fractal game of communities themselves. So you could actually structure a whole country this way. So yeah, I wanted to point that out so that you guys see the way I'm seeing these long term.
Yeah. I happen to agree with you completely that this concept of helping local, whatever word I want to use, right? Whether it's local value capture or local power capture, bubble up in a better way to state levels and beyond. I think it's a very big deal to be exploring that, and I'm fully with you on that. There's some implementation details to talk about, like when does the token get minted, and there's some work to be done around how do we initially fund those liquidity pools that you're talking about, right? So there's some unanswered questions, I think, on some of those points. But I think the model you're describing is safe enough to start building, even as there's some other questions still out in front of us. So let us urgently build up the documentation we need. And I'd love for you to be an initial reader of that documentation, and we can have some conversations about how to implement all the work that you've done already on fractal democracy.
Wonderful. So I do have possible solutions for the financing part that you just mentioned. I just don't want to take all the time here in this meeting.
Yeah.
So we can discuss that if you guys want.
Yeah, definitely. Let's assume we'll get, because I have to go in 3 minutes, unfortunately. Let's assume that we will get to those unanswered questions about financing. But we just recognize that it's ahead of us, and I know that you've probably got some thoughts on that already. That's great. Beautiful. And I'm sorry to be cutting this one short. Harsha, can we look at the CSS problem real quick? Because I don't want to leave you hanging there. And
Oh,
then,
no, we can figure it out. Like it's okay. We don't have to rush through. It's not like a critical problem or anything.
what's the nature of this beast?
Uh, it's just there are multiple props in a specific component, and when that prop is hit, like something has to happen. But because there are multiple props, one thing is taking precedence over the others. So, yeah.
You sound like a real developer. I recognize that problem. That's great. Very good. Cool. Send me a screenshot in Discord if you are blocked by it, but it sounds like you already have some ideas. But yeah, if there's a specific like case you want me to look at, I'm happy to. Right. Well, thanks. We're going to do this session one more time. And I think let's consider if some kind of dev stand up a couple times throughout the summer makes sense. So yeah, for next week, we're going to close out this weekly session formally for the summer. But if we wanted to have like a once a month get together for a little bit longer to look at stuff we're building together, I'd be open to that. So bring ideas next week. And is fractal democracy officially on the agenda for the Odin session? Yes,
It
right?
is the agenda for the
It
Odin
is the
session.
agenda. Excellent. All right.
Teva wanted confirmation because he's going to invite Singularity Net and a few other communities as well.
Cool. And Adrian and I had a nice long conversation with Tavo, and I think he finally came around to understanding why it might be worthwhile to encode some of the work he's been doing in Datum rather than just taking receipts in the form of metadata. So this local state conversation, we don't have to use the Odin time for that, but I'll be looking for connections between this and Tavo's work next week. It'll be fun to listen to that.
Cool. And if we do move forward with the Summer of Collab, that could be a place where these kind of conversations can happen as well as small experiments or updates.
A 1 week collab sprint to build an outlandish local state sounds like a really fun use of time.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks you all for hanging out today. Really, really productive couple of hours. I'm in awe of that open spaces. Really, really amazing where we are right now. So thanks. All right. And if anybody's watching this video, we get together on Thursdays. We're going to take a break after next week. But if you're around on Thursday, May 22nd, want to drop by Gimbalabs, we'll be closing out our school year here in the Northern Hemisphere. School usually goes from the end of summer, maybe around September, to right around now, May or June. And what we do is in the summertime, we quiet down a little bit and do some deep work. So summer starts after these sessions next Thursday, but join us if you want to drop by. And always drop by the Gimbalabs or Odin Discords to follow some of these conversations and see where people are meeting up. Thanks for being here, and talk to everybody soon.